Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Jai Shri Shri Radha Madhava Ashta Sakhi Vrinda ki Jai, Shri Shri Gaurnitai ki Jai, Shri Prabhupada ki Jai. Okay, I can share my screen now. So I did not attend the class yesterday and I could find it I couldn't find it online. So I asked Ganapati Govinda Prabhu and he said today's verse is 441. So we will recite this verse. Please repeat after me, those who can. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 We are reading from Bhagavad Gita as it is, chapter number 4, text number 41. Please repeat after me. Yoga Sanyasta Karmanam
Yoga Sanyasta Karmanam
Jnana Sanchinna Sanshayam
Jnana Sanchinna Samshayam
Navantam Na Karmani
Atmavantam na karmani
Nibadhanti Dhananjaya.
Nibaddhanti
Bhagavate
Dhananjaya.
Dhananjaya
Yoga Sanyasta Karmanam
Yoga Sanyasta Karmanam
Yogasannyastakaर्माणम्
Jnana Sanchinna Sanshayam
Jnana Sanchinna
ज्ञानसञ्चयन्
Samshayam
Navantam Na Karmani
Atmavantam na
आत्मवन्तं न कर्माणि
karmani
Nibadhanti Dhananjaya.
Nibaddhanti
निबध्नन्ति धनञ्जय
Dhananjaya.
Yoga Sanyasta Karmanam
Yoga Sanyasta Karmanam
योगसन्न्यस्तकर्माणम्
Jnana Sanchinna Sanshayam
Jnana
ज्ञानसञ्छिन्न संशयम्
Atmavantam Na Karmani
Atmavantam
आत्मवन्तं
na
न कर्माणि
karmani
Nibadhanti Dhananjaya.
निबध्नन्ति
Nibaddhanti
धनञ्जय
Dhananjaya.
Could you please chant?
Yoga
Go ahead, Mataji.
योगसन्न्यस्तकर्माणम्
Yoga Sanyasta
योगसन्न्यस्तकर्माणम्
Karmanam
ज्ञानसञ्चिन्नसंशयम्
Jnana
ज्ञानसञ्छिन्न
Sanchinna
संशयम्
Sanshayam
आत्मवन्तं न कर्माणि
आत्मवन्तं न
Atmavantam Na
कर्माणि
Karmani
निबद्धन्ति धनञ्जय
निबध्नन्ति
Nibadhanti
धनञ्जय
Dhananjaya.
योगसन्न्यस्तकर्माणम्
Yoga Sanyasta
योगसन्न्यस्तकर्माणम्
Karmanam
ज्ञानसञ्चिन्न संशयम्
Jnana Sanchinna
ज्ञानसञ्चिन्नसंशयम्
Sanshayam
आत्मवन्तं च कर्माणि
आत्मवन्तं न
Atmavantam Na
कर्माणि
Karmani
निबध्नन्ति धनञ्जय
निबद्धन्ति
Nibadhanti
धनञ्जय
Dhananjaya.
Yoga sannyasa karmanam
यो
sannyasta karmanam sorry
Yoga Sanyasta
योगसन्न्यस्तकर्माणम्
Karmanam
jnana sanchinna samshayam
Jnana
ज्ञानसञ्चिन्न
Sanchinna
संशयम्
Sanshayam
atmavantam na karmani
आत्मवन्तं
आत्मवन्तं
न
न
Atmavantam Na
कर्माणि
कर्माणि
Karmani
nibandanti dhananjaya.
निबध्नन्ति
Nibadhanti
निबद्धन्ति
धनञ्जय
Dhananjaya. Okay, thank you. Yoga,
योगा
Yoga
Yoga
high devotional service in Karma Yoga.
by
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 devotional
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 service in
service.
कर्म
service in
yoga
karma yoga.
Sannyasta,
Sannyasta,
sannyasta
Sannyasta,
one who has renounced.
one
one
who
who
has
one
has
who has
renounced.
renounced
Karmanam,
Karma.
Karmanam.
The fruits of actions.
The
The
fruits
fruits
of
of
actions.
actions.
Jnana,
Jnana.
Jnana.
by knowledge.
By
By
knowledge.
knowledge.
Sanchinna,
Sanchina.
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 cut.
Cut.
Sanshayam,
Samshayam.
Samshayam.
doubts.
Doubt.
Doubts.
Atmavantam,
Atmavantam.
Atmavantam.
situated in the self.
Situated in
Situated in the self.
Na,
na.
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 never.
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 Karmani,
Karma.
Karmani.
works.
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 Nibadhanti,
Nibadhan.
Nibadhanti.
Nibadanti.
do bind.
To
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 bind.
bind.
Dhananjaya,
Dhananjaya.
Dhananjaya.
O conqueror of riches.
O
O
conqueror.
conqueror of riches.
Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Sri Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. One who acts in devotional service, renouncing the fruits of his actions, and whose doubts have been destroyed by transcendental knowledge, is situated factually in the self. Thus, he is not bound by the reactions of work, O conqueror of riches. Purport: one who follows the instruction of the Bhagavad Gita as it is imparted by the Lord, the personality of Godhead Himself, becomes free from all doubts by the grace of transcendental knowledge. He, as a part and parcel of the Lord, in full Krishna consciousness, is already established in self-knowledge. As such, is undoubtedly above bondage to action. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langhayate Girim Yatkripatamaham Vande Shri Gurum Dinatarinam Paramanandamadhavam Shri Krishna Chaitanyamishwaram Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Presthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. My obeisances at the feet of all the Vaishnavas. So we are coming towards the end of chapter number 4, Transcendental Knowledge. And Krishna, he spoke about different kinds of sacrifices. And then he came to the topic of accepting a bona fide spiritual master for the sake of knowledge. So when he described the section of various kinds of sacrifices, he concluded with an important message. Does anyone remember what that message was? After describing performing various activities as a sacrifice, he said something. Before he enters into the section of knowledge. Any guesses? It's okay if you don't know the exact answer. Because there are two things going on in here. There is action and there is knowledge. And there's some relationship. So I believe it's probably verse number 32 or 33. Let me pull that up. So in verse number 33, he said, O chastiser of the enemy, the sacrifice performed in knowledge is better than the mere sacrifice of material possessions. After all, O son of Pritha, all sacrifices of work culminate in knowledge. So this is the relationship between the work and knowledge. And in this particular verse, Krishna is emphasizing that within the work, the aspect of knowledge is important. And Acharya Baladeva explains, like you have rice. I hope at least some of you have seen the grain rice, not the whole grain rice. Did any of you see a rice plant? Have you
Yes.
seen that? Okay, so when you have the rice plant, you have grass, and then what do you have? Do you just get the white rice from the plant?
No,
What do you have?
I don't know how to say it.
How do you get the white part?
Husk,
Okay.
Prabhu. Husk, Prabhu.
Yeah, so you have the rice grain, and then you beat on it, and then you separate the husk, and then you get the grain that we eat. Of course, now it goes through a lot of polishing process. That's why it looks so white. But in the olden days, you basically you grind it by beating on it. Mother Yashoda has the grinding mortar. So instead of going it like this, what you do is you take a long pole and then you start beating on it. And in that process, the husk separates and then you get the rice. So all these different kinds of sacrifices that are mentioned, those activities, they are like the husk. But understanding the purpose for which we are doing them, the aspect of renouncing those activities, the results of those activities for Krishna, and doing those activities in the mode of I am simply doing it on behalf of Krishna. Krishna is the actual doer, not that I am the doer, not in that consciousness. So that kind of thing, that is the actual rice that needs to be extracted from the actions. Therefore, Krishna has said, O chastiser of the enemy, the sacrifice performed in knowledge is better than the mere sacrifice of material possessions. After all, O son of Pritha, all sacrifices of work culminate in transcendental knowledge. Sarvam karma akhilam partha jnane parisamapyate. So it literally means the activities, they end in knowledge. So from the actions, we are extracting knowledge. So this is very important aspect of this nishkama karma, acting without expectation of results. It will produce knowledge, and during the performance of activity also, we perform with this idea that I am simply acting on behalf of Krishna and I am not the doer. Krishna is helping me to do this activity, and the result also it doesn't belong to me. So this is the idea through which we act. So then that person, yoga sanyasta karmanam, jnana sanchinna sanshayam. Again, there are two things in here. One is karma and one is jnana, but they are related. This relationship must be understood. And that person who acts in that way, then he will be properly situated. So there are various words in this, but various Sanskrit words. Yoga sanyasta karmanam. Yoga sanyasta karmanam. Now we all know what is the definition of yoga. What is the definition of yoga?
Union?
Connection.
Okay. Union, connection. How did Krishna define yoga? Particularly that's suitable to this topic. of
Ashtanga yoga?
activity.
Ashtanga yoga, joining of limbs.
Ashtanga yoga, it will come up in chapter number 6. So, but in these topics where Krishna is focusing on what yoga?
Jnana yoga? No.
Karma yoga.
Karma.
Karma yoga. Of course, Jnana yoga is also coming out of this karma yoga. So he has defined in chapter 2, I believe verse 48, Yogastha kuru karmani sangam tyaktva dhananjaya. Does anyone know the rest of the verse? Yogastha kuru karmani sangam tyaktva dhananjaya siddhya siddhyo samo bhutva samatvam yoga uchyate. Describe what exactly is yoga. Yogastha kuru karmani. You perform duties being situated in yoga, but what is yoga? Perform your duty equipoised, O Arjuna, abandoning all attachment to success or failure. Such equanimity is called yoga. So yoga means whether we get a successful result, whether in our action, whether there is success or whether there is no success. And if we are able to be equipoised in these situations, that Krishna is defining as yoga. We perform activity and we renounce the result, but we may have expectation for the result, that the result has to be in a particular way, and then we measure ourselves just by that outcome, but we want the outcome in a particular way. And when it doesn't, we get disappointed. Even in Krishna consciousness, we may be we may want to do something, or we may do a particular service, but the outcome is not the way we want. And then we may not feel devoted to Krishna. Like, why did Krishna do this? Okay, we get mad at Krishna, or we get mad at devotees. But then that itself means we are not properly situated in yoga. So what we are considering to be devotional service is just that activity, but not the consciousness. But the consciousness is very, very important. And that samatvam itself is called yoga. The ability to be equipoised, Krishna is describing it as yoga. So now coming back, so yogastha kuru karmani, being situated in yoga, do the activities. And here, yoga sanyasta karmanam. So by that process of equanimity, then we give up the activities for Krishna. We give the results to Krishna in our actions. In our karma, we do sannyasa. Sannyasa of what? Not that we are not performing activities, but the results of our activities are being given to Krishna, no matter how the outcome is. Outcome, we should admit that when we act according to the will of Krishna, then the outcome is also will of Krishna. And when that kind of activity is there, what happens is there is proper knowledge. But what is that knowledge? Jnana sanchinna samshaya. Now sanchinna, chinna means to cut to pieces. In Srimad Bhagavatam also there is a verse. Same in the aspect of cutting the doubts. Does anyone remember? In the very beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam, actually, second chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, it talks about cutting the doubts, cutting all the misgivings. Some of you are reading Bhagavatam every day. Does anyone remember? Chindanti vidyate hridaya grandhis chidyante sarva samshayaha kshiyante chasya karmani drishta evatmanishware. To the process of Krishna consciousness, beginning with Srinvatam Swakata Krishna, hearing Krishna Katha, there also chidyante sarva samshayaha. All the doubts, all the misgivings are cut to pieces. And here also jnana sanchinna sanshayam. So with knowledge, then the doubts, the misgivings are given up. Then there's also another, these are all, adjectives to the person, a particular person who is not bound by the actions. Nibadnanti Dhananjaya, he Dhananjaya, he Arjuna. Karmani na nibadnanti. Activities will not bind a person. But which person? One who is yoga sanyasta karmanam. His activities, he has renounced his activities being situated in yoga, means being situated in this idea that Krishna is helping me to do these activities and the results also belong to Krishna. And he's also jnana sanchinna samshayaha. His doubts, misgivings have been given up by knowledge. And then atmavantam, and here Srila Prabhupada translates atmavantam as situated in this self. Actually, this atmavantam has come also, just like the definition of yoga has come in the second chapter. This word being situated in the self is also described in second chapter. Does anyone have any guesses? Situated in the self. Has it come up in the second chapter? I'll give you one first line. I'm sure some of you probably can quote that verse. Traigunya Vishaya Veda. Does anyone know that verse?
Nistray Gunyo Bhavarjuna Nirbandho Nitya Sattvasto Niryoga Kshema Atmavan.
Niryoga Kshema Atmavan. Atmavan is what case, Gopi?
Nominative.
And Atmavantam?
Second case. What is that called?
Accusative, right? So the same words, just because it's Sanskrit, you see the endings a little bit different. But this word is also Atmavan. But because it is describing a person, that person is used in accusative case as an object to nibadnanti. This person is not bound. So same Atmavan. There also Krishna instructed Arjuna, you become situated in the self. And the characteristic of a person who is situated in the self is he is not bound by his actions. And there he said, Traigunya Vishaya, Nistraigunya Bhavarjuna. Yogas, the Vedas are teaching the subject matter of three modes of material nature, and you become transcendental to these things. That means basically you don't be attached to the results of these things. Transcendental is one beyond the modes, and one who is not bound is actually beyond the modes. So be situated in the self. So this is how this particular verse is describing the consequence, the outcome of a person who has properly performed karma yoga, but also jnana sanchinna samshayam. This knowledge is a product of nishkama karma yoga, product of acting without expecting results, but also it needs training on how to act. And where does that training come from? Where does that training come from?
From the Shastra.
Okay, from the Shastra. Yes, that is mentioned here in the purport. One who follows the instruction of the Bhagavad Gita as it is imparted by the Lord, the personality of Godhead himself, becomes free from all doubts by the grace of transcendental knowledge. From the Shastra. But is that what we studied in this chapter?
From the spiritual master?
Yes, that's precisely why when Krishna switched to the topic, when he said in 4:30 3, that all actions culminate in knowledge, immediately what did he say? After 433, what is the verse?
Tadviti pranipatena.
Pariprashnena sevaya.
Dikshanti te jnanam jnaninas tattva-darshanam.
Yes, upadekshanti te jnanam. They will give the knowledge. So the actions culminate in knowledge, but the knowledge comes from Guru. So that means that person who is guided by Guru in his actions, that person can be free from the bondage. And that person is established in proper knowledge. So we can see these are all connected. Action, not expecting results, guidance of the spiritual master, and the outcome. And the outcome of that knowledge is, Krishna says that that person sees that all the living beings are connected to me. And he sees them with equal vision. The result of that knowledge. So this knowledge is knowledge of the self and knowledge of the Paramatma also, knowledge of Krishna also. Often the word Tat Vidhi, the word Tat, what does the word Tat mean? In Tad Vidhi Pranipatena, what does the word Tat mean?
The truth.
Yes, the truth. And how do you describe the truth? Tat, how is Tat defined in Srimad Bhagavatam?
Vadanti tat tattva vidas tattvam yajnanam advayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavaniti shabdyate.
Yes, so that Tat, that absolute truth, is defined in 3 phases: Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. So this knowledge, the truth, learn the truth by approaching a bona fide spiritual master. That truth is realized in 3 phases, and it has to, this knowledge has to be of the self, but also knowledge of Krishna and how to serve him. And all these things are mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita. So now we'll go to the next verse. You can all repeat. Tasmadajnana sambhutam
Tasmadajnana-sambhutam
Ritstam jnanasinatmanaha
Pratstam jnanasinatmanaha
Chitvainam samshayam yogam
Chitvainam samshayam yogam
Atishtottishta bharata.
Atishto bharata.
Okay, so therefore the doubts which have arisen in your heart out of ignorance should be slashed by the weapon of knowledge. Armed with yoga, O Bharata, stand and fight. So we can see here, Krishna is not giving up on action. He is not giving up on Arjuna should not fight. So the knowledge that Krishna is talking about is action with the understanding that it is for Krishna, the result is for Krishna, and he is empowering me to do the action. Therefore, I have to act according to his instructions. That's the whole idea. That's precisely why he says again, Atishtottishta Bharata. Yoga Matishta. Having situated in yoga, you uttishta, you get up. Get up, why do you have to get up? He's not just saying, it means you get up and fight, because what happened to Arjuna in the first chapter?
He sat down on his chariot.
Yes, he sat down. He put his Gandiva bow aside and he just sat down. In one picture you see like this, he's banging on his head. And he just sat down. And getting up means he has to get up to do the duty in front of him, which is to fight on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, but with proper knowledge. And that knowledge we have seen previously is actually the key thing. activity is external. Arjuna is fighting and everybody else, Duryodhana is also fighting. Lot of things we do, they appear same. A devotee is working, a non-devotee is working. Both are cooking, both are cleaning. But what matters is that grain of rice inside the husk, that true consciousness, the activity with true knowledge. And that's the one that is illuminating, that reveals who we are and that reveals who Krishna is. And therefore here, that itself is a weapon. That knowledge is a weapon. Particularly, it's like a sword, Jnanasina. It's a weapon with which the ignorance can be cut to pieces. It's a very nice purport. Srila Prabhupada kind of summarizes the chapter in this one. Would anyone like to volunteer to read this purport?
I can read.
Thank you, Nanda Gopal Prabhu.
The yoga
I
system.
can volunteer.
Nanda Gopal Prabhu said he can read, so
It's frozen.
you
The
cannot
yoga-
hear me?
I can hear you, Prabhu.
Okay, yes, Nanda Gopal Prabhu, please go ahead.
The yoga system instructed in this chapter is called Sanatana Yoga, or eternal activities performed by the living entity. This yoga has two divisions of sacrificial action. One is called sacrifice of one's material possessions, and the other is called knowledge of self, which is pure spiritual activity. If sacrifice of one's material possessions is not dovetailed for spiritual realization, then such sacrifice becomes material. But one who performs such sacrifice with a spiritual objective or in devotional service makes a perfect sacrifice. When we come to spiritual activities, we find that these are also divided into two, namely understanding of one's own self or one's constitutional position, and the truth regarding the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One who follows the path of Bhagavad Gita as it is can very easily understand these two important divisions of spiritual knowledge. For him, there is no difficulty in obtaining perfect knowledge of the self as part and parcel of the Lord, and such understanding is beneficial. For such a person can easily understand the transcendental activities of the Lord. In the beginning of this chapter, the transcendental activities of the Lord were discussed by the Supreme Lord Himself. One who does not understand the instructions of the Gita is faithless and is to be considered to be missing the fragmental independence awarded to him by the Lord. In spite of such instructions, one who does not understand the real nature of the Lord as the eternal, blissful, all-knowing personality of Godhead is certainly fool number one. Ignorance can be removed by gradual acceptance of the principles of Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness is awakened by different types of sacrifices to the demigods: sacrifice to Brahman, sacrifice in celibacy, in household life, in controlling the senses, in practicing mystic yoga, in penance, in foregoing material possessions, in studying the Vedas, and in partaking of the social institution called Varnashrama Dharma. All of these are known as sacrifice, and all of them are based on regulated actions. But within all these activities, the important factor is self-realization. One who seeks that objective is the real student of Bhagavad Gita, but one who doubts the authority of Krishna falls back. One is therefore advised to study Bhagavad Gita or any other scripture under a bona fide spiritual master with service and surrender. A bona fide spiritual master is in the disciplic succession from time eternal, and he does not deviate at all from the instructions of the Supreme Lord as they were imparted millions of years ago to the sun god, from whom the instructions of Bhagavad Gita have come down to the earthly kingdom. One should therefore follow the path of Bhagavad Gita as it is expressed in the Gita itself, and beware of self-interested people after personal aggrandizement who deviate other from the actual path. The Lord is definitely the supreme person, and his activities are transcendental. One who understands this is a liberated person from the very beginning of the study of Bhagavad Gita. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports to the 4th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita in the matter of transcendental knowledge.
Thank you, Prabhu. So it's a very nice purport. And Prabhupada starts with the yoga system instructed in this chapter is called Sanatana Yoga, or eternal activities. He started 4th chapter with, what was the first verse of the 4th chapter? Imam Vivasvate Yogam, that's verse number 2. Yeah. How does he start? Does anyone remember? 4:1. Yes, thank you, Mataji. Imam Vivasvate Yogam. Yeah, then after that, Evam Parampara Praptam. Yes. So he glorified this yoga, Imam Vivasvate Yogam Proktavanaham Avyayam. And then he said, I gave this knowledge to Sun God, and also I gave this to, this is very ancient, this ancient science of yoga. I think that's the one Mataji was saying. Evam parampara praptam imam rajarsho vidhu sakaleneha mahata yogo nashtaha parantapa. And this supreme science, it came in disciplic succession. So that means this is very ancient knowledge. And sayevayam maya tedyam yoga proktaha puratanaha. This is what I was looking for. Yoga proktaha puratanaha. This ancient science, ancient yoga. And how ancient is it? This is eternal science actually. Sanatana Yoga. This chapter is called Sanatana Yoga. Puratana Yoga, Sanatana Yoga, eternal activities performed by the living entity. And he's saying it has two divisions. One is sacrifice of one's material possessions, and the other is called knowledge of self. And now this particular sentence, Srila Prabhupada is again talking about what we have discussed, 433. If you see in this particular verse, Shreyan Dravyamayad Yajnat Jnana Yajna Param Tapa. So one is Dravyamaya Yajna and the other is Jnana Yajna. Dravyamaya Yajna means, Dravya means something that is gross or physical. Dravyamaya of material possessions, and the other one is the knowledge. But then he said, then Krishna said, then all the activities, they culminate in jnana, they culminate in transcendental knowledge. So when we see here Prabhupada using the word the material possessions, sacrificing of material possessions, we should not think this is giving donation, giving charity. And the other one is knowledge. This Dravyamaya Yajna, it represents everything else that Krishna has spoken about sacrifices. Now, we can see this later in the purport when Srila Prabhupada mentioned, where did he say that? Here. Ignorance can be removed by gradual acceptance of the principles of Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness is awakened by different types of sacrifices to the demigods, sacrifice to Brahman, sacrifice in celibacy, in household life, in controlling the senses, in practicing mystic yoga, in penance, in foregoing material possessions, in studying the Vedas, and in partaking of the social institution called Varnashrama Dharma. All of these are known as sacrifice, and all of them are based on regulated action. But within all these activities, the important factor is self-realization. So these are the two things Prabhupada is talking about, and it's kind of summarized in these things. Knowledge of self is self-realization, and everything else is sacrifice of one's material possession. So these are the two divisions of the sacrifice. One is the self-realization aspect in those sacrifices. Another thing is the external activities. And those external activities are called Dravyamaya Yajna, and Srila Prabhupada is calling them as material possessions, sacrifice of material possessions, which is exactly what you find in the translation to sacrifice of material possessions in verse number 33, which is indicated as Dravyamaya. And particular usage of Dravyamaya, according to Baldev Vidyabhushana, in this verse number 33, the Dravyamaya indicates the all other sacrifices also. And when they culminate in self-realization, when we are doing them for the purpose of self-realization, then that is the main aspect. That is the grain in the, that is the rice in the grain which is separate from the husk. So I wanted to point that out, that this line just doesn't simply mean giving some donation, some material possession, but everything else, including the householder, controlling his senses and all those. But the purpose, we should understand for what purpose we are doing all those things. So these are the two divisions of the yoga. One is external acts of sacrifice, and the other one is the aspect of self-realization. That's what Prabhupada also calls the Krishna consciousness, the aspect of consciousness, aspect of realization of who we are and who Krishna is and what the relationship is. So when we come to spiritual activities, we find within the spiritual activities, within the aspect of realization, within the aspect of knowledge, again, there are two divisions. So one is activity, and the other one is the aspect of realization, aspect of jnana, aspect of knowledge. And that aspect of knowledge is further divided into two things. One is knowledge of self, and the other one is the truth of the knowledge regarding Krishna. One is who are we, and the other one is who Krishna is. Now, if you remember at the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, in the introduction, Srila Prabhupada said Bhagavad Gita talks about 5 subject matters. Does anyone remember what those 5 are? The 5 aspects, 5 subject matters of the Bhagavad Gita.
One is the field of activity.
Yes.
One is the jiva, the soul, individual soul. Another thing is, I'm trying to remember,
Kala.
the super soul,
Ishvara.
the Ishvara, yeah.
Yes.
Ishvara, and time, aspect of time, kala,
Yes.
and
Yes.
one more I'm missing, I don't know.
Karma.
Karma. Yes. Ishvara, Jiva, Kala, Karma, Prakriti. Okay. So now here we are seeing through the process of karma, by properly acting, and it with element of jnana in it, overcoming the influence of Prakriti, and acting properly under the guidance of spiritual master, we come to realize the knowledge of self as well as knowledge of Ishvara, the knowledge of Jiva and the knowledge of Ishvara, all encompassing all these subject matters. You see how all of them are interleaved, how each of those are connected, and with proper realization, we can overcome karma, we can overcome the influence of Prakriti and perform karma in a proper way, and through that we will understand the knowledge of the self and knowledge of the Ishvara. All these things are available. Prabhupada says one who follows the path of Bhagavad Gita, then this it can be understood. This spiritual knowledge can be obtained through the knowledge of Bhagavad Gita. And if we follow this Bhagavad Gita, then it's not difficult to understand Krishna. Even in this chapter, Krishna also talked about himself. He talked about how he's different from us, how he remembers everything that's given to Arjuna, but Arjuna doesn't remember. That gives the difference between Krishna and the living entity. And the living entity, however, he is in bondage, but if he performs these sacrifices, acts according to the knowledge of Krishna, the knowledge given by Krishna, then he will properly understand. For him, there is no difficulty. And then that is beneficial. The beginning activities of the Lord are discussed. And one who now he's contrasting, which is 439 or 440. One who does not understand the instructions of the Gita is faithless and is to be considered to be misusing the fragmental independence. is misusing if he does not follow those instructions, if he doesn't Shraddha, if there is no Shraddha, no faith in these instructions. And the result of not having that faith is what? Here Prabhupada is saying, one who does not understand is fool number one. And one who doubts the scripture, he falls back. Krishna used the word vinashyati, I believe. Vinashyati, pranashyati. That person will be lost. That means he'll fall down. If he does not believe these words of Krishna with faith, what Krishna has given in this chapter, one who has no faith, then that person will fall down. But if we follow properly by gradually accepting these principles of Krishna consciousness, then it will free us from bondage. That is the result. And the real student is one who has this faith in the Bhagavad Gita. In the introduction itself, Srila Prabhupada made a statement, one should at least theoretically accept that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then only we can derive benefit from the Bhagavad Gita. If we do not have that much faith, at least theoretically, okay, practically we haven't realized, but theoretically let me accept and then proceed. One time Giriraj Maharaj, he said in one of his realizations or interactions with Srila Prabhupada, so in the beginning he came with this impersonal idea that he is God. And Prabhupada said, if you are God, then how did you forget? And if you forget that you are God, then you must not be God, because God should not forget that he is God. So anyway, so then Giriraj Maharaj, I think he had some interaction, and then he asked Prabhupada, what if Krishna is not God? So as far as our information goes, according to previous acharyas and our, following the process, the experience, Krishna is the Supreme Lord. But then if we go on with that understanding, and then after going to Krishna, if we realize that there's somebody superior to Krishna, then we'll surrender to that person. We'll surrender to whoever is superior to Krishna. But then there's nobody, according to scripture, according to parampara, proper understanding. We went ahead with this, and this knowledge is so perfect. But then we go to Krishna and figure out there is someone else, then yeah, we'll surrender to that person. So Prabhupada is very rational. And Giriraj Maharaj, said that was Prabhupada's mood. Yes, we have this Shastra, we have this, by following this with faith, we realize this knowledge, and from the previous acharyas in the disciplic succession, the next part, Prabhupada is talking about the disciplic succession, the parampara. And through that we know that Krishna is the Supreme Lord. And particularly in the introduction, he says on the authority of Ramanujacharya, we accept that this Sanatana, this is eternal, this is Sanatana. And he says, he gives the example of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Shankaracharya, they all accepted Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this is the process by which we accept. Granted, there are opinions. If you go into the academic world, there are so many opinions. So many opinions. Recently, there was a podcast, Krishna Kshetra Swami, and I forgot his name. He's retired Oxford professor. And they were talking about the hermeneutics, how to interpret Shastra. How to interpret Shastra, because there's so many different ways of interpreting Shastra. And modern scholars, unless you give an opinion that was not previously stated, you cannot get your PhD. Nasa rushir yasya matam na bhinna. A person cannot be called as a rishi if his interpretation, if it is not different from someone else. So you have to put forward some philosophy. So therefore, they are motivated to challenge the existing system, the existing understanding. And Sugopi is reading, as she's, because of her research in Gaudiya Vaishnava, and she has to go through what scholars are saying about Gaudiya Vaishnavism. And interestingly, I don't want to name anybody, but there'll be people who have come in contact with ISKCON, and they have, now it's a good subject matter, ISKCON and Krishna consciousness, and Prabhupada's mission. He has made it popular. And they take certain aspects, and oh, Prabhupada didn't talk about this, there's something else, and they'll bring out some meanings which will shake even our faith because of their interpretations. And they try to present it in a scholarly way. But then which information do you take? Prabhupada is saying here, it is, and beware of self-interested people after personal aggrandizement who deviate others from the actual path. Their goal is to deviate because that's how they get their PhD. If you just say that, okay, Prabhupada said this, and you write your paper, they won't even award you a bachelor's degree, what to speak of PhD. So then how should it be approached? So therefore, we have to be very careful in seeking knowledge. From what source we seek knowledge. And that's why Prabhupada when we used to see Prabhupada is like, okay, mundane scholars and this and that. Why is Prabhupada saying this? Why is Prabhupada saying this? So it is not external actions. Someone is just studying the external actions, they will not be able to get it. Hidden in the external actions is this realization of Atma Jnana which is coming out. And that Atma Jnana is a result of Nishkama Karma Yoga. It is not just mundane information. Only when the activities are performed for the service of the Lord and the results are given up, then the knowledge is awakened. It is not a logical information. It is not just logic, but it is awakened knowledge. This knowledge is awakened through the process of yoga. And that knowledge is different than mundane knowledge. But how to act for that, we need guidance from the spiritual master. When we act according to the guidance of the spiritual master who is coming in the parampara, then the knowledge will be awakened. Otherwise, Bhagavad Gita is available to everybody. Why is Krishna calling it a secret in the 9th chapter? Guhyam, Guhyataram, Guhyatamam. Because there is this element of surrendering to Krishna and acting without attachment. And all these things, they will bring true knowledge. That person will only be free from bondage. Not everybody will be free from bondage. So I thought I would mention that in context of following the bona fide disciplic succession. That's why tadvidhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya. Pranipata, falling down. Nipata means falling down. Pranipata, totally falling down. Pariprashna, not just prashna, but pariprashna, humble inquiry, and seva and service. You don't find this in academic world. There's no concept of service. You give some money and you challenge the status quo. And then there's no question of falling down. So in that environment, the true tattvam, the tadvidhi will not happen. So this is the right process. In this process, the knowledge will be there, which will liberate us, which will help us see who we are, which will help us see who Krishna is. So this is the last couple of verses of the 4th chapter. I'll stop here. Thank you very much, all of you, for your association. Anyone, is there any quick comment, question from anyone?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, please accept my humble obeisances, all goes Prabhupada.
Yeah, my obeisances are Krishna Prabhupada. Yes, Prabhupada.
In the later half of the purport, Srila Prabhupada mentions that one should read Bhagavad Gita under the guidance of bona fide spiritual master with service and surrender. So, Prabhu, if I talk for my particular case, though I have no good qualities, by the causeless mercy, no got accepted as a disciple. But I was never fortunate enough to follow that line to the T, like either render any services or listen the Bhagavad Gita from the spiritual master. So how should I understand that? Like, if you can help me.
Well, one thing is you can still hear his lectures, and that's Swami's lectures are available widely. That's one thing. Second one is service. There is Vani and Vapu. Following the instructions is you can do service by following their instructions. When if they say you do this and this, and then you follow that, that is also service. And pranipata you do in front of picture also. But of course the spiritual master does not know that you are doing it, but Krishna knows that as Paramatma in the heart, Krishna will know that. And like that and when you get opportunity, then you do physical service also, helping in the projects. And that's one thing. And another thing is the goal of spiritual master is to engage us in the mission of Srila Prabhupada. Okay, so at least what my spiritual master told me is, I am giving you initiation on behalf of Srila Prabhupada. He said, I am giving you the beads, but it is Srila Prabhupada who is making contact with Krishna. So on his strength, I am giving you these beads. On his strength, I am giving you this initiation. And if you don't accept Srila Prabhupada as your guru, then your understanding is not right. So in that sense, Srila Prabhupada is also our spiritual master, and his books are what we are studying. And again, same thing, instructions of Srila Prabhupada are there on how we should be serving in ISKCON. Srila Prabhupada's instructions are there. There's an administrative body, and our spiritual master is there. Prabhupada's books are there. So we, in harmony, we put all of these in harmony, and that will equate to serving the spiritual master. And even Srila Prabhupada himself, he didn't have a lot of direct service, but the instruction was there. And Prabhupada wrote to him, please give me some service. I don't have your direct service like your other disciples. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati said, you do preach. He empowered him and he told him to preach. And now we are all helping in Srila Prabhupada's service. And what is Srila Prabhupada's main service?
Book distribution.
Yeah, particularly to preach
Krishna consciousness to the Western world in English.
Yes. Western world in English. Paschatya Desha Tarini. That's Srila Prabhupada's main service. Of course, I think it's Tamal Krishna Maharaj who said, Prabhupada, we should change that to Vishwatarini. You're delivering the whole universe, not just Western countries. And I heard from my Guru Maharaj that Prabhupada smiled. He said, that's all right. But my Guru Maharaj specifically told me you have to deliver the West. That's why I have that in my pranama prayer. So yeah, we should, if we help in that mission, then we are helping, serving our spiritual master. I hope that's useful, Prabhu.
Thank you very much, Prabhu.
Yeah. Okay. Is anyone withholding anything to say?
I just want to make a comment. That's because Prabhupada's Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati knew that if the West was converted, especially America, the rest of the world would follow.
Exactly. He called them my dancing white elephants when he took his disciples to India. With love and affection, he used to call them as dancing white elephants, so that Indians would feel inspired.
And they did. Yeah.
Yes, of course. Yeah, I was totally inspired. Yeah. Okay, so thank you very much, all the devotees, for your association. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha.
Ananta
Srimad
Koti
Bhagavad Gita
Vaishnava
ki
Jai.
jai.
Srila Prabhupada ki Jai.
Jai.
Srinivasacarya Prabhu ji ki Jai.
Hare Krishna, everyone.